This is the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, getting you the information that you need to be a successful real estate investor. Hosted by Mark Monroe, Ronnie Walker, Gabe Rodarte, and me, Marty Grizzanti. Combined, we've done thousands of real estate transactions. So get ready for real stories and true case studies on finding deals, growing portfolios, and making money. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, guys. Guess what? Today is the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, and we're coming to you with a couple of my good buddies here that we're going to go over some awesome real estate stuff. We have some just a great person that has a crazy amount of stories you guys are going to get today with Brad being here. I'm really excited for that. He's from my home state, Texas.
Yeah,
even the Houston metro area. So if you guys hear any banging, I just want to let the podcast people know.
What you don't realize, guys, is, I moved to Michigan from Texas, and I went to the promised land.
I don't know about that. I moved from Michigan to Texas.
Oh, man.
I guess it's your perspective, right? It's your perspective.
I get out of the cold weather, man.
I moved back. I grew up in Alaska, so it was like I finally got to enjoy it again, just not at such an extreme rate.
There
wow. You go. So we got Ronnie. Ronnie, how you been?
Dude, I'm doing awesome, man. We've got a lot of good stuff. Got some really cool stuff going out to the audience. Starting this next week, people are gonna see, and deals on the table. Flipping some. I got 6. I got 2 going on the market soon. And I'm going to view, and we can let people know, but going to look at a pretty good $12 million storage facility that we're looking at, and got some really awesome stuff on the table, man. Thank you for asking. Yeah,
for sure. So, guys, we're going to jump into this because Brad has a ton of information that he's going to share with us, and so let's just jump into it. So, Brad, how you been? What's going on?
Been doing great. Just kind of bouncing back from a pretty challenging month in September. Was kind of intermittently in and out of the office with some family problems. But, I like to look at things through maybe a different lens than others. It's kind of God's way of testing you for something bigger and better ahead. But just, moving ahead. Capital School's just growing like a weed. We got students in about 10, 11 countries around the world today, and just busy doing deals.
That's awesome. So we're going to hit up on Capital School, so those who don't know what that is, and go from there. So let's jump in from something that we just kind of like to do when we're asked questions like, hey, how did you get started? I mean, you weren't Brad Blazar your whole life, right? Like you were, but you weren't like the real estate, mogul going traveling across the world and visiting all these countries. So how did this all start?
So it all started actually many years ago. I was going to school at the University of Texas, and go Longhorns, right? And I was really kind of wanting to be an architect. That's kind of what I grew up wanting to be. I was great at drawing stuff, loved making models. And while I was in school, responded to an ad in the local newspaper. This was even before we had the internet. And there was a small local oil company there in Austin looking to hire people to get on the phone and just really reach out to high net worth individuals, build relationships, raise capital. And so I was just a little punk, a little 21-year-old kid, kind of cocky, and went in there. And I guess I just impressed the CEO. He said, "Look, man, you're a sharp kid. You can think real fast on your feet. I like you. We'd like to give you a job. Come on in, between class, after school, and we'll kind of teach you everything you need to know." And so I was hired into this small little oil company at the age of 21, and working literally about 12 to 15 hours a week. I was making close to $100,000. I mean, I thought I hit the holy grail. I was driving around in a Porsche, having the time of my life. And I'm sitting there going like, geez, if I'm making this kind of money just working 12 to 15 hours a week, like no telling how much I could make if I was working a full 40-hour week. And so I went to work for a second company doing exactly the same thing, and just, got better at it, kind of exercised that muscle, built a bigger network of investors. And unfortunately, we found out through one of my investors who was a petroleum geologist that second group, let's just say they were dishonest. And so I immediately resigned, not wanting to be any part of that. And all of the investors that I had cultivated in this network kind of looked at me because they had no idea I was a little 23-year-old kid. I was doing all of this over the telephone back then, Gabe. And they said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I don't know. And they said, why don't you do the same thing, but just do it honestly? And so at the age of 23, and here's the funny thing, I had never drilled an oil well. Number one, I knew nothing about building or managing a multi-million-dollar company. I just knew how to get on the phone and raise money. But I put a shingle on the door, printed up some letterheads, some business cards, and lo and behold, I was the founder and CEO of a small oil company that I built up over the course of about a decade. And, we quickly grew. We had about 35 employees at our peak. And what I realized and what I learned at a very young age is you got to build a team around you. I knew I didn't know how to do any of that shit, but I knew I could find a lawyer that did and a CPA that did. And so, you kind of build that team as an entrepreneur so that you go from being a solopreneur to an entrepreneur. And that's where I learned how to raise money. We raised literally millions a month. I hired up some sales guys, taught them basically how to get on the phone and do what I had learned. And that's kind of how I got into the groove of being known as a $2 billion guy. I kind of capitalized on that much later in my life and established a career going out and raising hundreds of millions of dollars for some of the country's largest real estate syndicators, some of the world's largest financial services companies, and of course, many deals of my own.
Brad, that's
crazy.
That's awesome. First off, just jumping in and, even from the very beginning, like what you're talking about, right? You're in this group, you're making a bunch of money, you're kind of living the life. And then you're met with this dilemma of like, holy cow, these people are not doing it right. A lot of people at that point would be like, what do I do? Right. Mm-hmm. And would compromise. But the fact that you were like, you know what? I want to do this right. It only propelled you to that next level and really set you up to, really care about your character more than you cared about the dollars you were making and moved you to the next level. So what was the transition between oil and building this team around you and then using that skill to raise money for, the real estate industry, right? Like getting in and impacting the real estate community? Why did you bridge from oil to the real estate community? And in what way are you kind of impacting that community now, kind of going into uncertain terms, people deciding, you know what, I'm not sure how to maximize the opportunity. I don't know what the strategies are. Like, what was that journey like? And what is kind of your focus today with where we're at?
Sure. No, it's a great question. So when I decided to launch my business, you got to remember, back then, the TV show Dallas was like the biggest show on TV. Hell, everybody wanted to be J.R. Ewing, right? And so, unbeknownst to my parents who had scrimped and saved like most parents to put their kids through school, I just one day turned my back to my education and basically just dropped out of college. So here I was, not a college graduate, a punk kid at the age of 23 that was now telling everybody, hey, I'm the CEO and founder of an oil company. And my parents didn't even know. So here I am out there doing my deal. And, at the end of the semester, they get my report card. And of course, the phone rings. They're like, what the hell are you doing? You got straight incompletes and straight Fs. And I'm like, well, I launched a business. And, I quickly went from being the loving son to the black sheep of the family. Like, what do you know about running a company? You're not a college graduate. You don't have an MBA. But that changed very quickly when I came home for the holidays driving a brand new 928S Porsche, when my brother came running out the door going, my God, Dad, look at Brad's new car. He's driving a Porsche. And I went from being the black sheep to, this is our son, the CEO. And that was a very funny journey. But, after oil prices collapsed and they took away the tax incentives that really incentivized people to invest in oil back in the late 80s, 90s, I had to make one of the toughest decisions probably I've ever made. And that was, I made the decision to collapse the business because I didn't want to put all of my savings back into this, just trying to keep it afloat. As an entrepreneur, you have to realize if there are things that are beyond your control that are affecting your business or the growth of the business, sometimes it's best to adapt and just go in another direction.
Well, that is, sorry to cut you off, but that is so powerful what you just said.
Absolutely.
There, and being able to adapt. I guess I want to dig into that. Just one more is, how did you decide that it was time to adapt versus the mentality of, yo, don't quit, right? Yeah. The idea of, man, we're 3 feet from gold. We're 3 feet from gold versus, no, I need to pivot. Walk me through that process.
Well, number one, when I launched the business, oil back then was selling at about $36 a barrel. And, all the wells and stuff we had drilled, it cost me about $11 to $12 just to produce a barrel of oil. They call that the lifting cost. Well, if you're getting $9 for the commodity, but it costs you 11 to 12 to produce it, you're basically losing $2 to $3 a barrel. It's like, this is nonsense. So what happened back then is you just basically go through the process. We call it shutting in your wells, which means you just basically turn them off. But unfortunately, in Texas, they have these idiots that drive around the oil fields that when they see wells shut in, you get a real nasty letter from the Texas Railroad Commission that says you got to put your well back in production. And if you don't, there's a penalty of $10,000 a day. And you're like, that's a catch-22. So that's kind of what led me to make that decision. When I collapsed the business, and by the way, I did it over the course of about a year, gave everyone severance, like to say we did it the right way. I never had to file for bankruptcy because we had no debt on the books. We were completely debt-free. But then I realized that, maybe it's best if I go back to school, finish that undergraduate degree that I never completed. So I actually re-enrolled, changed majors, came out about 2 years later now, with a degree in finance, and went to work in corporate America. And I just realized I'm not happy here, not making nearly as much money as I was back then. And what led me to the journey on today is I was watching a TV show, and it was Steve Harvey. And Steve was on stage in front of his audience, and he said to the audience, it's my belief everyone here in my audience has a unique talent. It's what I call you're something special. But he said, here's the problem. 97% of you will never find that talent. You'll have no idea what it ever is. That's why we have so much unhappiness, so much discontent. That's why 67% of the people out there working already have 1 foot out the door. You hate your job. But he said, here's the secret. If you can find out what that one special talent is and package it up and deliver it to the world where it helps others, it's a magical thing. And about a week later, I sat there and I was on my back patio, and I still remember this vividly. And I'm like, my God, everybody in the world has a desire or a dream to do something bigger in life, whether it's get into real estate, launch a business, scale the business they have. And the reason that they can't do that something bigger is just because lack of capital. They don't have the money to start that restaurant they've always dreamt of. They don't have the money to get into the real estate business. And I said to myself, Jesus, with the knowledge I have, the hundreds of millions I've raised, I can become the catalyst to help people unlock that bigger dream and help people transform their lives. And so that's what led me to basically go out and not only raise capital for others, it was also to teach people how to do this. Because every day, man, all the money you need to do anything in life is right around you. They're called investors. It's just that most people do not understand how to attract their attention. Most people don't have any idea what to say to them once they get in front of them. And so that's what really kind of has led me on this journey of raising capital and really just teaching others how to do it.
Man, this is freaking amazing. This is some good stuff. How long ago was this Steve Harvey thing? I'm just asking.
Oh, geez. A couple years ago, I went into basically, I guess, working alongside some of the largest real estate investment trusts, raising hundreds of millions of dollars for these guys. Many of them today have multi-billion-dollar portfolios, where I was brought on as the national sales director to build out the team, hire the salespeople, manage that entire process, which I know intimately well. And now we're helping entrepreneurs do exactly that same thing. But the Steve Harvey thing was probably maybe, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. But that was really the catalyst that launched Capital School, that today has become this huge global brand where, we have students that are raising a couple $100,000. So they're basically flipping houses or doing light rehab. I got students that are raising literally tens of millions of dollars. It's just all over the spectrum, depending on whether they have a fund and how they're going about the process of attracting and raising that capital.
This is awesome. So for those who are listening, I just want to, because we are freaking off to the races in this conversation, guys. Like, this isn't like, we're going to gradually jump in. This is like freaking, let's hit this thing hard. Right, Ronnie?
Right. So if you guys are still like listening to this half tune, you might want to rewind it and just
start over. Just
because we're gonna add, a skill that's going to just catapult you to the next level.
This is freaking crazy. Okay, so Brad's going after this thing. Okay, so Brad, this is the story. You have all this crazy thing, all this experience of raising capital and communicating with people, building teams, building these other things. You get, basically an awakening, so to speak, of going, look, man, I got a way that I can give back. I'm going to accumulate all of my skills, all of my stuff, hand it over to other people, help them grow their stuff. And it's a mixture of capital and experience and what industry they want to do. Real estate investing is mainly what we do here at the Power Play group of people. And then what class, where you're at, commercial, residential, whatever you're doing. And now you get to help people grow from there. So because this is the key of this conversation, help us understand, what is Capital School? Like, why did you create it? And then what's really happening there?
Yeah, great question. So I'll share a story with you. When I was in the oil business, I was looking to hire some people and build out my team. And so, we blasted out some ads in the local paper, and we were getting resumes. And one day this guy shows up. And you got to imagine this in your mind. My office was in a very prestigious office building in downtown Austin, Texas at the time. We had pretty much the whole third floor. And everybody in the building pretty much are suits, business attire. We had, law firms, major accounting firms, major broker dealers, Prudential-based securities, Shearson Lehman. So we're in a professional environment. Well, this guy comes in for an interview. And he's dressed in a pair of jeans that had holes in the knees. He had on work boots that were covered in dust and mud. He had a flannel shirt, a big Fu Manchu mustache, and a mullet for a haircut. And so for those of you listening, and for Ron and Gabe, if you've ever seen the movie Joe Dirt with David Spade, this dude was Joe's first cousin. I mean, and so I'm sitting there as the founder of this company looking at this guy that shows up for an interview. And I think most of us would understand, many CEOs or business owners just would have said, I'm sorry, you're not dressed appropriately. Let's either reschedule or just go home. But there was something about him. And so I said, look, let's grab a cup of coffee. And we went into my conference room. And I asked him at the end of the interview, Jack, why do you want to come work here for me? And the answer he gave me was what gave him the shot of a lifetime. He said, look, man, as you can see, I'm a pretty easy, humble guy. I work out in the oil fields in West Texas as a roughneck, which explains the way I'm dressed. But he said, my wife and my daughter have much bigger dreams and ambitions than me, Mr. Blazar, and I just want to give them everything in life they deserve. And I sat there and I looked at this guy and I said to myself, man, this guy's going to work his ass off. He'll show up earlier and stay later because of the two ladies he just named, and he wants to give them everything in life they deserve. So I hired him, and the first day he shows up, after being in the office and seeing where he'd work, he showed up dressed exactly the same way. And so I'm sitting there going, Brad, man, maybe you just made the biggest mistake of your life. You hired this guy. Like, how is this dude that's dressed up like Joe Dirt going to get on phones and convince people to send him checks for $50,000 and $100,000? And then I just said, come with me, young man. We got in my car. I took him to a department store. And that day I invested about $1,000 in his future. I bought him 2 suits, dressed him from head to toe. Then I took him to my barber and I said, hey, let's give this guy a Hollywood makeover like we see on TV. So he cleaned him up. The next day when Jack showed up, man, he had some swag. He was feeling good. I said, here's the script. Here's what we do. And over about 2 weeks, I taught him the process. I taught him the 4-step blueprint, taught him the validation phrase, taught him the trust sequence. All of these things are key concepts and principles we talk about in our capital school. That year, I kid you not, Joe Dirt raised $25 million and earned $250,000 in commission. And I said to myself, if I can teach that dude how to raise that kind of money, I can teach pretty much anybody. And so you have to understand what capital school really is. It is a structure and a framework where we teach people certain key principles that they need to understand and know to go out and attract and raise money. People that try to raise money typically flounder. They make a lot of mistakes and then they eventually give up, thinking raising capital is like next to impossible. When in reality, it's not. It's just that you have to understand some key principles. And once you apply those and once you get in front of people that have money, magic happens.
So Brad, so that one, thank you so much for sharing that story because that's freaking awesome. So for me, I am in this process where I'm flipping houses. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at storage facilities and building this stuff. And capital is one of those key pieces when you go into these bigger deals, right? Yeah. Just like you say, people have dreams. People want to push that mark. You know, for me, one of the things that just drives me is this idea of what is my actual potential, right? Mm-hmm. How can I train the team around me? How can I level him up? How can I go to the next level? But just like you said, when you jump into raising capital, there's a number of factors that I run into. One, it's getting in front of the right people to talk to. 2, then it's offering credibility. And then it's putting the right offer of like, hey, is this here? And, you know, just to be completely frank, like I've raised money, but I've not raised anything like what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And I struggle with that, right? I struggle with, I would say, getting in the right room and then presenting it and positioning it in a way that shows them the benefit to the deal. So guys who want to come to the school and say, yo, I'm on the fringe, right? Yeah. I'm working my ass off. I'm building this business. I'm going to these deals. I've got this happening. What is kind of, you know, they come in, they approach you, and someone like me, if I was to come to you, what is that first step that you say, you know what, focus here to get that biggest step? And this is the foundation that you need to put in place in order to take you to the next level.
Yeah, that's a great comment there, Ron. So here's the one thing that a lot of people overlook. In order to be successful at raising money or at anything else in life and in business, you need to have systems and structure. And so many people that go out there trying to raise money don't have the proper structure, meaning they don't even have a CRM system to create reminders or tasks after they have conversations with people that could potentially invest. And so as an example, if you meet someone that's worth a couple $1 million and you have a great introductory call, but you don't remind yourself in some fashion to call that person back in a week, you're on this treadmill of unproductive activity, just talking to tons of people. You see, raising money is a series of events. You have to think of it like a football player moving that football downfield to the end zone. There's going to be an introductory call or a meeting. Then there's got to be a follow-up call with that person to go deeper, ask more questions, get to know them better. Then you're going to do something that we talk about that I call the validation phrase. You want to validate that there's enough foundational trust to move that person forward so that ultimately they will feel comfortable investing with you. And there's a phrase we use called the validation phrase. Then there's the pitch. Now you're pitching the deal to them. And then hopefully there's a close. So there's really a process to this in moving people from one call to the next. Well, if you don't understand that, you're just kind of going about it haphazardly. And many of our students have said it was understanding these key principles and then applying them in the meetings and in the Zooms or in the phone calls with the people I was in front of that made all the difference in the world for me. But you see, when you're out there looking to raise capital, you have to realize there is not a right way or a wrong way to get in front of people that have money. You can host events. You can use, social media. Today, you can advertise for investors with some of the exemptions that are out there. Number two is you can Google investor meetups and start going to investor clubs that are there in the town you live in. I don't care if they're meeting to talk about the stock market. I don't care if they're meeting to talk about crypto. By definition, everybody at that meeting says, I'm an investor. That's why I'm here. And once they learn what it is you're doing in real estate, many of them are smart enough to understand they got to diversify so they don't have all their eggs in one basket. And when they hear about your deal and when they hear about the real estate stuff you're doing, many of them are willing to meet with you and then potentially write checks. So one of the things that we talk about is just being more active, being more engaging and more knowledgeable of the fact that every day you're probably interacting with people that could potentially invest with you. But it's really, again, how you introduce yourself. And then more importantly, what it is you say to them to kind of put that bait on the hook.
Dude, that is so incredible because you said it's a series of events.
Yes.
Right. And I think, from my end, personally, it's like, okay, let's have this conversation. Let's show them a deal. But really, there's this almost like this courtship process, what you said, right? Where it is. And specifically that validation phrase of, you know what, this is a good investment for you. And this is why working with me gets you what your goals are.
Absolutely.
Guys, go back and listen to that, because I think just like a football play, just like, when you're playing chess, in order to get to the goal, there's multiple moves.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is understanding those moves allows you to win more often rather than just kind of fumbling through it, hoping the relationship carries you.
Absolutely. 100%. And here's the thing is I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage and speaking alongside Brandon Dawson, who many might know as, Grant Cardone's partner in the 10X brand. And both Brandon and Grant say, people got to know you before they will flow you. That's kind of one of Grant's sayings. I've heard him say that many times. People got to know you before they will flow you. That just means they got to really know you well. They've got to trust you. They've got to believe that you've got things in place like an accounting infrastructure, some way at the end of the year to report their proportionate share of profits and losses through some type of tax reporting. They got to see some sense of structure to your business. Until they see that, fat chance in hell they're going to write you a check. Another expression
you're telling me they're not just going to write me $1 million check if I'm just a guy on the street, is what you're telling me.
Well, yeah, exactly. So they got to feel that sense of trust and believability. But the other phrase, in addition to that one that I've heard one of the other top business coaches say, my good friend Coach Michael Burke, is money follows motion. So remember that motion that you're creating is meeting somebody that initially might have interest in what you're doing. And then saying, hey, next week on Thursday, I'm hosting a free live webinar to talk about the multiple tax benefits of investing passively in real estate. Would you like to join us for that? Sure. You send them a link. Now they show up at your webinar. You come on as a person of interest and you position yourself as an expert. And then post-webinar, you're now following up again. Hey, you see, you're moving that person forward from one call or one Zoom to another until ultimately you close them. And there is a right way, of course, to ask people to invest. One of the big challenges with a lot of people is they never ask. They never close. They just expect the guy to say, hey, what's the next step in the process here for me to do something with you? It don't work like that. It does maybe 1 out of every 20 or 30 times, but invariably you have to ask that person and close them. Gabe, sounds like we could really do a lot together. I'd love to invite you to partner alongside us. How much of this deal would you like to take today? 50,000, 150,000, 200,000, or nothing? And then you just bite your tongue. And usually the person, after what might seem like a long pause, comes back and says, well, tell me again, what does $100,000 get for me? And you explain it and you say, are you comfortable with an investment of that amount? Yeah, great. And you just go straight to filling out the paperwork. You've got to understand that in business, there is a difference. And everybody hear me on this. There is a difference between being a salesperson and being a closer. The closers are the ones in sales that make the big bucks because they know how to close. Sellers are real good at selling flirt. That's my expression. They're real good at flirting. So get good at closing, grow a set of cojones, create the positive tension, and close that person that's got the money that can help you do your deal.
This is freaking amazing. Like, I love this. Thanks a lot, Brad. You said so much there. I wanted to go back to something that you said. I'm like just taking down notes over here. You talked about like the flow. We talked like from what Ronnie was saying, getting to that touchdown line, get into the end zone. What are some principles that you know for sure as you have students come in, you talk to so many people that they're like the light bulb goes on? Like all of a sudden, where is that light bulb moment for you and your students that you're like, man, because I know what that's like. Whenever you help someone, like whenever we help someone and they have this light bulb moment, and I'm going, and they're like, man, that took a freaking hour and a half to get that across to them. But when it did, it was just like, oh my gosh, Gabe, I couldn't sleep for a whole week. I've been thinking my whole life, like what you just told me. So what does that happen with some of your students?
Well, I think there's kind of, some, like you said, light bulb moments. One is if you've never raised capital before, and then you go out there and you apply some of these things and you finally do get someone to invest with you, you're like, holy crap, this stuff actually works. Like, well, yeah, duh. And then it's just a matter of, rinsing and repeating the process. You go from one investor to getting 3 to growing that to 10 and building that network. And then after a year, you look back and you're like, holy cow, I've raised $3 million. We had a guy actually speak on one of our weekly training calls we do, guy named Sam. And I kid you not, he started his capital raising journey last year in March. So March of last year, here we are now, October. That's roughly, 18, 19 months. The guy's raised almost $25 million in a span of almost 18 months. And so I went to my community and I said, folks, today's speaker is going to be a guy named Sam. Dude's raised $25 million. He's reaching out to people strategically on LinkedIn, building that relationship, reaching out to CEOs, reaching out to business owners. He knows they're qualified. He's building that trust. And so he's going to share with you tonight the strategies and the things he's doing. But I said, here's the thing. Don't compare yourself to him. I said, even if all you do is go out there in the next year, year and a half and raise $5 million, just 1/5 of what Sam's done, that for you is still life-changing money. And so you have to understand that when you're out there, quit comparing yourself to everybody else. For a lot of our students, man, just raising $500,000 is life-changing money. Because if you can take that and buy 2 or 3 houses, put some lipstick on them, flip them where you're making 30, maybe 60 grand a flip, man, for some people, that is life-changing money. That allows you to pay off your bills, get a little cushion behind you, and then go on to do those bigger things in life. And the great thing that I've always loved about real estate that Kiyosaki writes about in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is you can very quickly get to a point where you create enough passive income, or you create enough cash flow by flipping houses where you got some real money behind you, where now you're free. You can quit that 9 to 5. You can focus on the things to really start accelerating your wealth and get to that point in life we're all looking for, which is that financial freedom. It's the ability to do what you want to do whenever the hell you want to do it and with whom you choose to do it with. Most people never get there. Why? Because they've got a job. Understanding how to use OPM, other people's money, is powerful. It's one of the key principles. And here's a saying that is a Brad Blazarism. Too many people out there are on a very powerful drug. It's more powerful than LSD, heroin, and it's called Hopium. You're hoping your shit gets better. You're hoping you get a raise. You're hoping you win the lottery. And it's a very powerful drug because you can hope the rest of your life. The much better drug is opium, which is other people's money. So I tell people, understand that, and it will literally dramatically transform your future and change your life.
Man.
You know, Brad, you just hit on something I think is very powerful. And the reason why I believe it's really powerful is hope is very powerful.
It is.
But hope also, there's this gap between where we're at now and what we're hoping for, right?
Yep.
Like there's this gap that a lot of time we don't know how to bridge. And I think right now, that hope can also turn to nervousness.
Yes.
And then can turn to uncertainty, can then turn to straight out dread. Right. In the possibility of a market turn. You know, I think in real estate, there's so many strategies. And if you're prepared and if you know what to do, you can ride the wave up as the wave continues to go up, which has kind of happened over the last, 10 years, right? Yeah. People have ridden the wave, whether they're amazing at what they do or they're absolutely terrible, right? The wave rises all boats.
Right.
But as things are starting to potentially crest, right? And interest rates are going up. And right now, I wouldn't say people are scared, but people are like, man, I hope I got my stuff together. I hope I'm here. I don't know what's going to happen. What are my strategies? With opium, with other people's money, and specifically raising capital and moving into this next step. Because I think capital is an absolute. Me and Gabe were just on a call last night, literally at 11 p.m., talking about resources and capital in order to be prepared. What are some things that you believe, in other people's money and raising that are, highlights that you're focusing on with your students moving into this next phase of the market and really, that we should be aware of that are impacting the real estate industry as we're moving forward, and some tips that you might be able to give us?
So I think, that's I won't say a loaded question, but there's a lot in that, obviously, because we know that, rising interest rates does obviously affect real estate as well as other industries. And so, you need to be a little bit more cautious. You need to obviously underwrite deals with the expectation that rates will obviously rise and go against you. And so, some of the strategies that a lot of people were taking advantage of, like refinancing deals, may not be as attractive. Why would you refinance to a higher interest rate in 3 years if rates continue to climb? So you have to look at what was being done and what worked versus kind of the norm in what will work going forward. I think that there will always be a need for entrepreneurs to raise capital. My message is raising capital should be every entrepreneur, every business owner's superpower, because the strategy most people employ, whether it's in real estate or really any other business, is you go to a lender, you go borrow the money. And as we know, a lot of people just can't get debt from a conventional bank. They don't have good credit. They don't have that track record. They don't have that banking relationship. So then they go and they talk to a hard money lender. Well, there's plenty of lenders out there that will loan, 70, 75% LTV, but you're getting indebted. And when you go to lenders, they have rights called the right to foreclose, the right to mess your shit up. Investors don't have those same rights. You see, when I invest with you, I invest on the full faith and credit that you're going to act as a fiduciary, you're going to work your hardest, but I'm a big time investor. And if the real estate market turns against us and you come back to me and say, look, it was my intent to distribute to you 7%, but because of the economy, the best we can do now is only 4, maybe 5. There ain't much that investor can do. They can't come and take the keys to the property. Yeah. They can't come and foreclose on you. And so as I've built businesses, I've always come to realize that building a business off the backs of investor capital is a much safer play, because you can raise money from investors and you can still structure it as debt and not give up any equity. Or, of course, you can give up some of the business, some of the upside, which a lot of people do, and give up some of that as well. But there's plenty of ways to structure deals. But at the end of the day, I think that once you're able to build kind of that network where you've now got a database, now you can grow your business. I mean, we got lots of people in our Capital School community that are big time real estate entrepreneurs. And, for them, if they're going out and they're doing a $30 million deal and they need to raise $10 million, boom, they just blast out an email. They sit back and their investors just kind of respond, put me down for 100, put me down for 250. And before you know it, inside of a week, 10 days, they've raised $8 to $10 million bucks, but they've been doing it much longer than a lot of the newbies. So, you have to realize that it's just showing up every day, going through the motions, basically exercising the muscle and honing the craft and having conversations with people. And here's the best thing about this whole process. If you do a good job and you execute on the strategy of whatever it is you're in, your investors will then start to open up their network. They'll start referring you to people that they're connected to. And so it becomes easier the longer you do it. I can tell you, when I was in the oil business, we would get calls from a lot of our investors. Hey, I want to introduce you to 3 people that I know have money, that have expressed interest, that are waiting to hear from you. And now it's not me trying to convince somebody how great and wonderful I am. That person that's making the referral has already done that for me. So it's much easier now to sell or to close that new investor that's being introduced to us, because essentially somebody that they already trust has made that referral on our behalf.
Yeah. And guys, I think this is so powerful because as people especially put their money is, right, there's that phrase that says, the heart follows where the pocketbook is.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And once you validate, once they validate that, this is a legit strategy, there's almost this human need to brag about it. You know what I'm saying? Where you go to your friends dude, I just put my money in, with Brad, and Brad did this, and they're like, yo, I'm not doing that. What's going on? Who's this Brad character? Why haven't you introduced me yet?
I mean, that's largely it. And I tell everybody, always under promise and try to over deliver. If you're underwriting a deal and you think that that deal could support a distribution as you're collecting rent, you're covering expenses, and you underwrite it and say, well, I think we can pay out 8%. Tell the investor 6. Knowing you might be able to do 7 or 8, because if you're paying them out on a quarterly basis and then once or twice a year you send them a nice check and it's a big surprise and they weren't expecting it, man, now you look like a genius. Now you look like, wow, you're outperforming the expectations you've established. Because the second you tell that investor 8 and then things turn against you, and now you got to drop it to 7 or 6, now you just stepped in a big turn. You see, now they ain't happy because you build expectations around something that was bigger and better. So I always tell people, in the world of raising money, always under promise and try to over deliver. And here's a key message for everybody. Last year when we did our big event, we call it Capital Con. We had a lot of, celebrity quality speakers. Shark Tank's Kevin Harrington was there. We had Sharon Lecter. She wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki, probably one of the greatest financial literacy advisors out there. But Kevin said, look, a lot of people come on the show Shark Tank, and they're smart people, man. Many of them are doctors, they're engineers, they got great ideas, great products, but they leave the show without a deal. And the reason comes down to one key word: execution. They haven't convinced any of the sharks that they can execute on whatever it is they're trying to do. And so as an entrepreneur out there, you have to understand that that potential investor is looking to you, and you need to convince them that you and the team you've built can execute on what it is you're trying to do. That's it. Once you can communicate the strategy that you can execute, that is such a golden moment, because a lot of people are out there and there's the doubt in the mind of that potential investor, like, are they credible? I looked at their LinkedIn profile. Their LinkedIn profile don't look so good. And so one of the things that we do in our curriculum when we bring on new students is we say, first thing, man, is sit back and let's do a social audit on how you look on the internet, because people are going to check you out. So what does your profile say about you? Do you come across as a successful entrepreneur? Do you have a website? Let's take a look at that, because most investors are going to get to a point where they say, Gabe, yeah, that sounds like a real exciting deal. Do you have something you can send to me that I can seek into? Well, if you've got a piss poor pitch deck, or we call it a PowerPoint, but if you've got a piss poor pitch deck, they're just going to look at that and toss it in the trash. So we have resources at your disposal where I can make anybody look like a multi-million-dollar brand. Because we got the administrators, we got the experts, we got the people that do this for a living that literally can take a mediocre pitch deck, reposition it the right way, and now when you're out there pitching, man, you look like a multi-billion-dollar real estate entrepreneur.
Guys, this is so key.
Gabe, weren't we just talking about this?
This is so key. We were
just talking about the credibility aspect of once you can show that you're executing, it just changes the game.
Yeah.
Right? Because it literally, you buy one building and all of a sudden it changes the game, because now you're in the game, you're fighting the battle.
Yep.
And man, that's
you have
so
proof.
good.
It's proof of concept.
Absolutely.
One of the blessings I had when I first got started is I had my first lender, and I just got off the phone with him yesterday. He's still looking at lending. We just sold a couple big properties, and now he's like, where do I put it next? But he was the CFO of a company that went from 6 million to 30 million. And he goes, I saw this whole process. And he goes, the thing that I like about you, Gabe, is you have the same resourcefulness as the CEO I used to work with years ago. And he retired. He's an older gentleman now. And he's, all he does is the lending for me. But I realized what you just said, this execution thing, it takes a bit of resourcefulness. It takes, hey, look, you're going to run across some. And I think that, is it true that pretty much anyone who has a decent amount of money to lend, they know, hey, look, you're going to come upon hardships. There's going to be some roadblocks. There's going to be some stuff. Do you have what it takes to overcome those roadblocks? Do you have what it takes to execute on these things that are going to happen eventually? And how safe is my money? How safe am I at? That's what I've seen traditionally. Now, here's my question for you. All right, this is a selfish question for everybody who's listening right now. I am at a place right now, kind of like with Ronnie and I were talking about. We've done all types of single family. I have some parks and I have some other stuff, and we're going into becoming the people that can raise a $30 million raise, $20 million raise on properties. When you see that shift, right? And I don't know if all of your students have that shift, or if it's just some of them already come in being able to raise capital. I think I do a decent job. Some of the stuff I'm taking notes on what you're saying to make sure I fine tune my plan. Yeah. But what would you say to somebody who they've raised probably $10 million or more already, and now they need to do $20-30 million just on one asset, just one single asset? What is the difference? Is there a roadblock? Is there any type of leap, or is it just the same system?
So that's a great question. And, I think what sets us at Capital School and me apart from others out there that are, quote, the gurus or the people teaching others how to, quote, attract and raise capital, is there's a huge difference between raising millions and raising billions. You see, I've raised money from every source you can fathom: high net worth individuals, family offices, sovereign wealth funds, institutions like insurance companies, pensions, trusts. And so when somebody comes to me and says, look, I've had success raising money, I've raised $20 million, but I've got this deal and now I got to raise more, or next year I want to raise 100 million. That becomes very challenging if you're still out there picking up checks for $25,000 and $50,000. So the strategy and the approach of how you do that needs to change. Now, somebody that has the demonstrated capacity needs to teach you and show you how to build communications and networks with the family office space, so that now when you're having a conversation with investors, they're family offices that can write you checks for 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, or you need to establish distribution and bring on a team of people to start distributing your offering through broker dealers, registered investment advisory firms. And there's a process of doing that as well. I've got one student who's got about 350 million, and he said, I want to be $1 billion company in 2 years. I said, Medina, you can't do that doing it the way you've done it. You've got to get a network of broker dealers. Let me show you how to go through that process. And so we've introduced him to the due diligence firms that he needs in order to get the pedigree. We've introduced him to these trade associations to get in front of these broker dealers, because the best way to really raise millions is to get other people that are properly licensed to do it for you. You see, one of the ways I've raised hundreds of millions is I built a network where I go to a broker dealer and I say, hey, how would you like to raise capital for my fund? And they do their due diligence. They say, yeah, it looks like a good deal. And they execute what's called a selling agreement. That simply means we blessed you and we blessed the deal. But now if that broker dealer has, let's just say 1,500 financial advisors across the country that now have access to sell your fund, every time they're sitting down with a client, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, other than your house, you don't really have any real estate. My firm has done due diligence on this wonderful self-storage operator in Texas. It's my recommendation. We put $200,000 to work. Here's what it looks like. And you sit back as the dude with the fund and you're getting checks every day coming in the mail. I mean, come on, how beautiful a thing is that? And that's how today some of the largest sponsors in real estate are raising hundreds of millions of dollars. Why? Because they've got that network. Now, obviously, it does take time to get there, but that doesn't say that you can't do it. It's taking baby steps. It's learning how to work with individual retail investors. Those are the doctors, the business owners, the entrepreneurs. You raise $5-10 million, boom, you graduate to the next level. That next level is now we're talking to some family offices, some investment advisory firms. Now you get to a point where you need help getting into that next level. And so the beautiful thing about our program is we can take newbies that have never raised a dime, but we can also take very seasoned entrepreneurs that are very accomplished and always take them to that next level.
Ronnie's mouth is just like,
let me just say this. A lot of people in real estate realize that they're at a point where for them, the most practical thing is I got to start a fund. I'm doing all these deals and I'm chasing money. But if I just had a fund, I could talk about the fund and now I could reposition myself and say, hey, I own a real estate private equity firm. We have a fund. We raise money from investors and the fund essentially replaces the asset. That becomes what you talk about all day long. And so when people invest with you, now the money goes into the fund and that account just gets bigger. See, now when you see a deal, hopefully you've raised enough money and it's sitting in the fund bucket to show proof of funds. Because when you have cash and you have a fund, now you can communicate from a position of strength and show the seller, hey, I got $5 million sitting in a fund bucket.
Am I looking at this all wrong though? Whenever people look at funds and go, man, that clock is ticking now on my fund. My money, I'm paying interest on this money. It's all in a bucket. We got a $5 million fund, $10 million fund. And now I guess the misconception that I've seen is that it's similar to a 1031 where like you have a limited amount of time where you, not the same, but the mentality of you got to find that deal. You got to go do stuff, to find a place for a placeholder for the money. Right. Yeah. And so is there a downside in all of this? And the reason why I'm saying this, because there's some new people in here that are going to be listening to this and they want to see, okay, look, this sounds great, but there's got to be some form of a downside to something, right? It's not all up and up, borrow a bunch of money, put it to work, and then your life is cheesy. Like, what's the downside that people need to be looking at?
Well, I mean, there's risks in everything we always do. And I tell people, look, legally and technically, the SEC has no mandate. You do not need a private placement memorandum to go out and raise money from accredited investors. Now, it's highly advisable you have one because that becomes your insurance policy and that discloses all of the potential risks. and makes investors informed in choosing to work with you or not. But here's the thing. The biggest syndicators that raise hundreds of millions of dollars, that raise money from broker dealers, when they come out with a big REIT or a big fund, number one is they haven't bought a property yet. And they go out and they market this to investors. When you invest, you're going to get a 7% distribution. It's going to be paid out to you on a monthly basis. And so someone puts in their money, the very next month, they get a check. The second month, they get a check. But that company hasn't bought any real estate yet. So how am I getting money back? It's one of the biggest secrets in real estate. It's called return of capital. They're just giving you a little bit of your money back until they buy that first piece of real estate. And then once they finally raise enough to take down that first property, now that spigot opens up, the money starts flowing, and they're able to cover those monthly distributions. Then they buy another property. So a lot of times in the raising capital world, we talk about something, and it's an expression called it's a blind pool, meaning we're raising money in a fund, but we don't have any identified properties yet. So what you do in your sales literature, what you do in your pitch deck is you have pictures with a simple disclaimer that says the photographs of these properties are not owned by the fund, but they're representative of the types of assets that we will be acquiring and buying. That's perfectly legal and it's perfectly acceptable. It gives investors an idea of what you're going to invest in. And then once you've raised enough to go out and actually make that first investment and then make that second investment, you start deploying that capital and you start building out that portfolio. But it's perfectly fine to go out and raise capital and tell people we don't have an identified property yet, but here are photographs of assets that are representative of the types of stuff that we're going to be getting into. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of millions of dollars I've raised for some of these big sponsors that come to market with $100 million publicly registered real estate investment trust. And they're giving investors a check every month and they haven't bought anything yet. It's very common. It's one of those things a lot of people don't understand, but it's done every day by some of the biggest firms in real estate like BlackRock, Apollo, any of these big boys. So if they're doing it, there ain't no reason the small guys can't be doing it either.
This is freaking amazing. We probably have like 30
your money back, and every month you're just getting a little bit of it back. And at the end of the year, when you get your K1, it's going to show you here's the money that was physically distributed from the collection of rents. Here's your share of depreciation. And oh, by the way, that little bit we sent you in the first 4 months before we bought that first property, that's not taxable because that was just a return of your principal until we got to a point where we could buy that first deal.
You know what's cool about all this, guys, is that this is the rich dad model. For those who are involved at the very beginning, here's the thing. We always advise people, pick up Rich Dad, Poor Dad, pick up Cash Flow Quadrant. Start there. It's the best place to start, really, if you want to grab the full big picture. And one of the things he talks about, one of the major things is OPM, learning how to put money to work and learning how to really just leverage yourself in the right way. And he talks about financial intelligence. And Ronnie and I were just having this conversation yesterday about different ways. I was explaining things of how I've developed, different stuff from my systems. And then, I talked to Brad and I'm like, let's just deflate that bubble. Good job, buddy. Good job. That'll do, pig. It's like that type of thing.
The other thing that you just reminded me of, Brad, that I think is so powerful is, in real estate, whether you're doing a wholesale deal, whether you're doing a flip, whether you're doing a large, multi-million-dollar commercial building, it really comes down to, do you have the knowledge? Do you know how to do this? Mm-hmm. Right? Do you have the right system, right? The right sequence of events? Do you know the path?
Yeah.
Right? Do you have the network, or do you know how to build the network? Like what you're talking about, going out and knowing the right people to build with. And then lastly, what you said is, once you've figured that out, knowing where to go to sit down in front of these opportunities. And if you have that plan, you can raise $200,000 to jump in and change your business, or you can go out and raise $15 million for this big complex.
Oh.
Man, that is really amazing. I just appreciate you coming out and being so open with some of the stuff that a lot of people don't talk about, and just making it your mission, like back to that seminar of realizing, man, this will really change people's lives.
Absolutely.
Even from this one conversation, man, you've impacted me and started turning my wheels and going from there. So thank you so much for just being open and making this your mission, man.
I'll tell you, what really makes my day is whenever we get an email or we get a text or we get a video from somebody anywhere in the world that says, man, thank you so much. I mean, I'll just share an example. I got a student from Brazil. Guy was very introverted when he met me, and he said, I just don't know if I can do this, man. I'm just real shy. And I said, man, just follow the system. Get out there, start going to events, start talking to people, and it will work. Today, the guy's bought 3 multifamily properties. He's got 3 multifamily properties under his belt. He's doing his 4th deal. He's raised a couple $1 million. We've changed this guy's future. And that's just one of many people that are out there. But I think the biggest thing for a lot of people, unfortunately, is that fear or that limiting belief that this won't work for me. This is too good to be true. No, it's not. The key thing is you just got to show up and do it. People always say, well, why do I fail? What happens if I fail or I'm not successful? What happens if you don't? Tim Grover, who coaches, of course, some of the most elite athletes in the world, the Kobe's, the Pippins, he's up there, man, with the guys that got their A game. He says at some point in life, you're going to get a really, really big bill. And that big bill is called regret.
Oh.
And he said, man, when you're in your senior years, do you want to look back over your life and say to yourself, man, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. I had every opportunity to do something great in my life, and I blew that chance. I don't want to do that. And I know everybody listening to this show doesn't want to do that. But that big bill, as he calls it, is called regret. And if you never get yourself out there and you never attempt to do this, you'll never know.
Yeah.
But think about it. It doesn't take a whole lot to significantly move the needle. For all you guys out there that are listeners, if all you ever did with the knowledge that we impart was find 4 or 5 people that just gave you $50,000, how would $250,000 to invest maybe in 3 deals change things for you? I'm not asking you to go raise millions. I'm just saying, man, go out there and find 4 to 5 people that give you 50 grand, get in some real estate deals, flip a couple houses, and get a cushion of money in the bank, and then realize that you now have the power to replicate that and do it over and over and build a financial legacy.
Man, I just felt goosebumps like go down my arm with you saying that, with that, like, no joke. I wanted to cut you off and tell you, but that's really powerful. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Man, yeah, absolutely. Guys, on the screen, you can reach out to Brad there at his website. Brad, thank you so much, man, for coming on. How else can people reach out to you?
Well, they can reach out to us there on Instagram. Just find me on Instagram and shoot me a DM. It's just Brad Blazar on Instagram. There's obviously some imposters out there. You'll know it's me when you see me. Just Brad Blazar, nothing else other than my name. Go to my website, bradblazar.com. Go to our Connect page and just reach out. Or you can just send us an email. The email's real easy. It's info, I-N-F-O, at bradblazar.com. Let us know you'd like to schedule a free strategy call or get on the phone or a Zoom with a member of my team. And, we offer that for free to anybody just to find out what you're doing, kind of where you are in that journey, to see what tools we have and what resources, whether it's just a free book, my book, Winning at the Capital Game, coming one of our master classes or the many boot camps we do. We got a lot of stuff out there. And the great thing about it is a lot of it is free or so inexpensive that it's like a no-brainer.
Man, that's really awesome. Amazing. Guys, this has been a rocking show. Probably one of my favorite shows, Brad. Just to say, this has been a really awesome experience. thank you for coming on and just sharing your wisdom, man, sharing your story.
I appreciate it.
And really, I think just opening up the minds to realize this is possible. You know, this stuff that a lot of people hope there is an action plan, and it's simple. It's a simple plan, and there's a simple step. And I love that you made it your mission to open up that step for people. So
absolutely.
Thank you. Gabe, you want to close us out?
Yeah, guys, you know how to get rid of us, get a hold of us. You go to YouTube, we're on podcast, you name it. It's the Real Estate Power Play Show. And Brad, thanks a lot so much.
Appreciate
guys,
it. Great job, guys.
Yes, thank you so much, guys. You know how to get a hold of them, and we'll see you guys later. Peace.
This has been another episode of Real Estate Power Play, guiding real estate entrepreneurs to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast, or follow us on YouTube at Real Estate Power Play.